It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're looking at Christmas weekend 1994, December 23rd. And it's one of those weekends where Box Office Mojo decided to screw around with me because I couldn't find a complete list of every single movie that came out that weekend. And needless to say, the next 2 weeks are going to be filled with a lot of movies that I don't know the correct order that they're in. I said yesterday there was going to be 5 movies that we were going to look at, but today we're actually going to look at 6 movies because I noticed that one movie was not on this list that actually did come out this weekend. So, this is going to be a quick one on this. I'm going to try to be as quick as I can, I should say, on these reviews here. So let's start off with the supposed big new release of the weekend, and that is the adaptation of the classic story Little Women, starring Winona Ryder. Well, besides Winona Ryder, you also have Gabriel Byrne, Trini Alvarado from The Frighteners, Kirsten Dunst, Samantha Mathis, Claire Danes, Christian Bale, Eric Stoltz, John Neville, Susan Sarandon, Donald Logue is also in here. And interestingly enough, 25 years after this movie came out, there was another version of Little Women that came out, which a lot of people I would assume have seen recently, which features Greta Gerwig directing it, and also features a lot of names, also a lot of very familiar names in there. I actually looked here for a moment to see if there was any of them that were in the original film, but no. It's a completely different story, and I like that version of Little Women. I also like this one, too. I'm not really that big of a fan of the book itself, but I think the performances in this really do stand out and make it worth watching, even if you've never seen any version of this that came before it, even if you've never read the story about the story that this is based off of. But it's a very good adaptation. It's directed by Gillian Armstrong, written by Robin Secord, who, if you don't know who that name is, you've definitely seen her work before. She's written a lot of notable films such as Practical Magic. She wrote Matilda, the '90s version, Memoirs of a Geisha, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. That one I think is her best film overall. But this movie's a really good film. It's a really solid film, strongly benefiting from the performances here, especially Winona Ryder, who she really gave a lot of great performances in the early 90s that I don't think gave her a lot of credit back then. I mean, she was heavily praised as one of the top rising actresses at the time, but there was also kind of a point where, for a movie like this, I know the year before she did The Age of Innocence, which was the Martin Scorsese movie, and there was a lot of people who didn't like her performance in that, but I thought she was alright in that movie. But I think she really works here in this film as well. I think the cast overall works very well. I think it's a solidly made film. Not much more I can add to it, but great film overall. They've actually made a couple of pretty good adaptations of this story over the course of the nearly 30 years in between this movie and the 2019 one. So yeah, not much more I could add to that one. So that's Little Women. Let's move on to the next movie, which I have to remember now because I didn't actually write it down. Okay, now I remember. It's Disney's adaptation of The Lion King, the live-action Jungle. I said the live-action Lion King, and I could pause and do that again, but let's just pretend I didn't say that. Let's talk about Disney's original adaptation, the live-action adaptation, I should say, of Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book. So again, kind of like with Little Women, this is actually the first of 2 live-action adaptations of The Jungle Book, which, of course, we got the 2016 one directed by Jon Favreau. And this is one that I don't think gets a whole lot of attention. This is actually kind of a decent film. Unfortunately, despite the fact that it has Rudyard Kipling's name all over it, kind of like with the Disney animated film, it has no real bearing to the original source material, just like the live-action version that came out in the 2010s does. But it works fine for what it is. I think it does a very good job of offering an entertaining, different take of a story that we know from the animated version. What's notable about this particular version is that this one does not feature the talking animals in here, and features mostly a cast that includes some notable names like Jason Scott Lee playing Mowgli. You have Carrie Elways in there, Lena Headey, pre-Game of Thrones, Sam Neill, John Cleese, Jason Fleming. Just some notable names all around here, and it is a very good version of the story. I think it's a well-made film. I know a lot of people wish that they could have done a little bit more of a faithful adaptation to the Rudyard Kipling book, but I mean, at least the 2016 version at least tried to do something like that. But I mean, give them credit for this. I know a lot of people criticize the Disney live action remakes, but this one's not actually that. This one's actually not half bad. It's actually a very solid film, and actually kind of predates the 101 Dalmatians remake that came out a couple years afterwards, which kind of has that same formula to it. And I mean, overall, I think it is a solidly made film. I think the action's very good. I think the scenes with the animals works very well. The comedy is a little bit hit and miss, but I mean, for what it is, it's a decent movie. I wish it. Oh, excuse me. I'm having a lot of trouble keeping it together today, yeah, like I said, it would have been nice to see more of a faithful adaptation to the original book. But I guess that, like I said, the 2016 version tries to do it a little bit better, but not by that much. But still, that movie I think is a far superior film with the technological achievements that they were able to work with there. But I think this version works fine for what it is. If you go into it with an open mind, I think you can actually really enjoy it. It's a good, fun family adventure film, and a pretty decent take on the story that we all know and love. So that's the original live action Jungle Book. But let's move on to the next movie that we have here, and that is the romantic comedy IQ with Walter Matthau starring as Albert Einstein. Really, I think the reason why this movie is such a charming film is because of Walter Matthau playing Albert Einstein. I like what he does in this movie. I think he's very good playing Einstein. I like that he's not playing the typical Walter Matthau role that we're used to seeing him in. He fits the role of Albert Einstein really, really well. And honestly, it's a shame that he didn't get any awards consideration for it, because I thought he did a pretty good job in this movie playing the supporting role in here. And I think the whole movie overall is a charming little film. I like Tim Robbins and Meg Ryan in here. I like that Tim Robbins has to kind of get on her level to get together, and I like their chemistry that they have together. The movie overall is very funny. It's a charming, funny little comedy. I really think it could have done a whole lot more to really make it stand out on its own, but I think there's just enough there that's so unique and so different, and it's largely because of what Walter Matthau does as Albert Einstein, which I think really sells the film overall. Like, the performances by Robbins and Ryan are great, but it's Walter Matthau that really does sell this movie. It's kind of an underrated movie. I highly recommend checking it out. It's a movie that I think deserves a lot more attention. IQ, I highly recommend it. So, with that said, on to the next movie, and that is Macaulay Culkin in Richie Rich. I stuck that commercial in there because honestly, out of all those movies where Warner Brothers would stick a Looney Tunes short at the beginning of it, this is probably the one where I would say that both the movie and the cartoon are both very fun to watch, because usually when they stuck the animated shorts on these movies, the movies themselves were not really all that great. This is probably the only one that comes really close to me saying this is a complete package that just works so well, because that Chariots of Fur shirt, I just mispronunciated there. Chariots of Fur shirt, Chariots of Fur, toy boat, Chariots of Fur. Okay. Yeah, I'm keeping all this in here, but that Chariots of Fur, I'm doing it again. Chariots of Fur. God damn it. Chariots of Fur. Chariots of Fur. Okay, now you're seeing some behind the scenes action here, but yeah, that Chariots of Fur short that they show at the beginning of this is actually really well done. Chuck Jones directed it, of course, and it's a classic style Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner cartoon, and it's very, very funny. It's very, very funny, nicely animated. It's a ton of fun all around, and pretty much you could say the same thing about the movie itself. I think this version of Richie Rich actually is very well done. I think maybe it's the mostly nostalgic factor for me because I saw this a lot when I was a kid, but I really enjoyed this movie. I like seeing Macaulay Culkin play this role. I think it fits very well for him. It's the only movie that he did during his peak when he was when he was growing up and he had the voice that sounded a little bit more adult to him. Because like I said before with the Pagemaster, if you listen to him in the Pagemaster and you listen to him in this, he sounds radically different. Like, he sounds like an older kid in this movie compared to what he does in the Pagemaster. But also a note here, this is the last movie he did as a child actor before he eventually retired and then came back in the early 2000s with more adult roles, such as in the movie Saved, and also, what was that other movie he was in? Maybe I could find it here. Party Monster, there it is. Yeah, Party Monster, but that was like 9 years after this, and this was the last film that he was in as a kid actor. And I mean, I thought it was funny. I thought it was a nicely made film. It's very silly at times. It's very comedic, but it was kind of every kid's fantasy in this movie. Like, I mean, what kid in the 90s didn't want their own McDonald's in their own house? What kid didn't want their own theme park? What kid didn't want all the stuff that Richie Rich had in this movie? I mean, it's very fun. It's very funny stuff. It's very well creative stuff. It's very creative and funny stuff. I'm just rambling on right now to fill out the time here, but yeah, like I said, it's a really solid film. I had a really good time watching it again. It took me back to my childhood, honestly. I used to watch this movie all the time. I used to rent it all the time from the video store. It's just a fun film all around. I enjoyed it a whole lot for nostalgic sake. It's a fun film. I really recommend it if you go into it with the right mindset. I think it's a very fun film, Richie Rich. So, you could probably say the same thing about the next movie that we have here, and that is Jean-Claude Van Damme and Raul Julia starring in the video game adaptation of Street Fighter. Okay, so you could definitely see a lot of the problems with Street Fighter because Jean-Claude Van Damme is playing the American Colonel William Guile, and for obvious reasons that doesn't work. But and there's a lot of other notable flaws in this movie that really could make a lot of people very upset. But I will tell you this much: after seeing what they did 15 years later with the rise of Chun-Li and how bad that movie is, this movie looks like Citizen Kane compared to that movie. I mean, yes, it's not a very good movie, but I'll be goddamn if I'm not having the time of my life watching this movie. I mean, this is a very campy movie. This is a very over-the-top film. And I think it's because Raul Julia really puts his all into this as M. Bison. He plays this role so well. And there is something fun about watching Jean-Claude Van Damme playing Guile and all these other characters in here that are cast like this. It's not a good movie by any means necessary, but it's a fun, guilty pleasure film. I mean, like I said, this kicks the crap out of what they tried to do with Rise of Chun-Li. And honestly, you could try to do what they did recently with Mortal Kombat. Try to make this in a modern, not even a modern setting. Actually get people who know the video game who could make a series of movies based off of this. Like, kind of an idea I would think they would try to do is that you start off with a big movie like the Street Fighter, and then you make spin-off movies expanding on these characters more. Like you do a movie about Guile, you do one about M. Bison, you do one about Cammy White, you do one about Ryu, you do one about all these other characters, Dalsum, Balrog, Vega, like all these people in here. Like, I think that could be something that could be very interesting if you get the right people to do it. I think with one of these, I think this movie kind of just came close enough. It comes about as close to a video game adaptation as you can get at the time, but at the same time, it really doesn't follow the source material all that well. But like I said, at the same time, you kind of don't mind it because there are moments in here that are just so fun and over the top that you can't help but have a good time with it. It's a silly movie, it's a ridiculous film, but I love the hell out of it. It's a guilty pleasure film all around. Not the best adaptation of Street Fighter overall, but a fun action film nonetheless. It's a movie that I didn't like at first, but as the years have gone on, I've grown to appreciate it more and more, especially after watching Rise of Chun-Li. It certainly beats the crap out of that one. And until the day that comes when somebody actually comes in and makes a good Street Fighter movie, this is probably the best one we're going to get, so unfortunately. So there you go, that's Street Fighter. Now let's move on to that sixth movie that I added because I knew it came out this weekend, and I do want to delve into it because, unlike some of the other movies we looked at, it's pretty bad. So, here you go, Steve Martin in Mixed Nuts. You know, it's funny Rob Reiner is in here because, of course, Rob Reiner made one of the worst movies of 1994, maybe one of the worst movies ever made, North. And while this certainly doesn't head to North levels of badness, it's still a pretty bad movie. I mean, a terrific cast involved here. Steve Martin, Madeline Kahn, Robert Klein, Anthony LaPaglia, Juliette Lewis, Rob Reiner, Adam Sandler, Lee Schreiber, Gary Shandling, Rita Wilson, Jolie Fisher, just a ton of talented people in this movie, and a great director who was just coming off of Sleepless in Seattle and writing movies like A League of Their Own and When Harry Met Sally, and you're just watching this and you're going like, what happened here? Like, what made this movie not work as well as these other movies that these people have been behind? And I think, honestly, it's just that there's nothing really all that funny in there. I think they're trying too hard to just stick stuff at the wall and just try to get some good laughs out of this, and there's just nothing really there. It's just maybe the writing just wasn't as sharp as they wanted it to. Maybe there wasn't just such a good idea of what they wanted to do, but yeah, I really don't like this movie all that much, and I've had friends of mine tell me that I'm kind of crazy for saying that, especially with some of the stuff that Madeline Kahn does in this movie. Like, there's a whole chunk of this movie where she's stuck in an elevator and she's just screaming at the top of her lungs. And I love Madeline Kahn. I think she can be very funny, but you got to give her something more to do besides just sitting in an elevator for a good chunk of the movie and just screaming at the top of her lungs. Like, give her something funny to do. I mean, it's not a complete loss because I will admit there are parts that do kind of make me laugh. Like, I didn't know for the longest time that Lee Schreiber was playing the woman who get the drag woman who was dancing with Steve Martin in here. Like, I thought that was I always thought that was Steve Martin in a dual role, but no, that was Lee Schreiber. And you know what? He actually was kind of funny. Like, he actually does have a lot of funny moments in this. Like, I felt he was one of the stronger aspects of the movie, and I thought the movie needed much more than that. I mean, they got a great cast involved in this, but there's just there's just nothing there that makes me think that there was something that they really wanted to say about this movie. Like, what was the overall plan for this movie when it was all said and done? And I just never really got it. I mean, I just think this movie was just all over the place. They just threw stuff at the wall. They got all these people involved and just said, hey, you know what? Make something funny out of it. And sadly, I don't think anything funny came out of it, really, except for a couple of good performances, especially from Lee Schreiber. But other than that, though, this is a terrible, terrible movie. I mean, it's a really bad film. It's not the complete disaster that North was, but it comes pretty close. I gotta say that. But some people have told me I'm crazy for thinking that, but you know what? That's the great thing about the internet and the great thing about doing stuff like this, because everybody can have their own opinions on stuff. Some people think this movie's good. People like me, I don't like it. But yeah, that's the great thing about the internet. Sometimes just get your opinions out there and then watch the insanity happen. I mean that's pretty much what the internet's kind of about, honestly. And just like now I'm just kind of rambling on here, but that's pretty much what this episode has been like so far. So okay, that bottom line, Mixed Nuts, not a very good film. Massive disappointment from somebody that made a great film like Sleepless in Seattle. So on that note, we'll wrap up this edition of Time About the Movies. But next time around, we'll have a mix of the movies that I didn't get to cover this week, and also some 1994 leftovers, which I didn't do for the last couple of years, I should say, because just other movies kept coming out, things kept getting in the way. But I have a couple movies here that were not on this list that I was kind of surprised by. The Christmas Story sequel, It Runs in the Family, was not on the Box Office Mojo website. Neither was Karate Kid Part 3, Troll in Central Park, The Madness of King George. We'll look at those 4 movies, plus we'll look at these other movies that came out on the same Christmas weekend, including Ready to Wear, aka Pret-a-Pote. I think that's how you pronounce it. Let's see, Safe Passage, Legends of the Fall, and Nobody's Fool. So overall, we got 8 movies to look at next time around. So we'll wrap up 1994 on the next episode. But until then, thank you very much for watching. And if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page. Check out the previous episode, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thank you for watching. I'll see you next time, and until then, as always, take care.